Okay, well, good morning. This is the morning, afternoon, good night, whatever it is, wherever you are. It doesn't, I have no way of knowing because you could be listening at a different time. You could be in a different place. No, I'm not knocking it or anything. I'm saying there's anything wrong with it. It's just, it's all this now. So my soundboard is a little daft. I'm having technical difficulties. I don't know what it is. That man is as dead as Julius Caesar. But anyway, welcome to the Jeremiah Gunn Show. Thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening. It's going to be a stream of consciousness today. We're going to, I'm having difficulties with the soundboard, and I'm struggling without a little bit of technical support, but I like to use music to do an intro and just can't. Anyway, here's the title. Here's the topic of this episode, this broadcast. Loneliness, Ted. That's the bottom line. Christmas. What was it for you? For me, it was a living hell. You know what it's like to fall in the mud and get kicked in the head with an iron boot? Of course you don't. Nobody does. It never happens. Forget that. Forget it, Ted. It's a stupid question. So anyway, I'll talk about loneliness today. This is Jeremiah Gunn Show. Jeremiah Gunn Show. The Gunn Show. Trigger warning, you're at a gun show. I want to announce again the fight of the century, the fight of the millennium. I want to fight against, take your pick, Gavin Newsom, Colbert, Don Lemonades. I think I'll let Bill Maher off the hook because he seems to be waking up from his stupor, but we'll talk about him a little bit later. Tampon Timmy, Adam Schiff, who should be in prison, not in the Senate. And, just these people they're not ashamed. They're not ashamed. And so why have a fight? Have a UFC type fight. If somebody could help set it up, it'll be for charity, it'll be for a real charity, not a Rob Reiner kind of a waste of your taxpayers' money to make himself feel better. It'll be a real charity. So let's do it. Pay-per-view or something like Doctor May Not Stop match, cage match, no holds barred, UFC, whatever. I'm going to need some training because I'm not a fighter. I love everybody, but as Solomon the Wise said, you need a bridle for a horse, a leash, and sometimes a muzzle for a dog, and just a rod for the back of fools because they just need to be beaten. These guys don't debate. They don't know how. They don't want to, and they just want to say things. Kimmy Kimmel, all those women. And even that man, Rachel Madcow. Let's do it. Let's have a fight because you guys can't use reason. You can't have a battle of wits with an unarmed man. So let's get that set up. Let's knock that smirk off your horrible face. Even if you're a movie star like Gas and Nuisance, American Psycho. Let's see if we can knock some sense into you. Okay? Can't debate. You won't. So let's do it. Anyway, this Jeremiah Gunn Show, welcome. This is the topic of today is loneliness, Ted. This show's dedicated to Charlie Kirk because some devil made us all lonely for him. Had no right to do that. The thief comes only to rob, kill, and destroy. And, we can say, his turning point is stronger than ever, but it doesn't really matter until that, whoever that was, and there was a lot of them from Kimmy Kimmel and the mainstream media, they all have blood on their hands because they made people hate them. All you professors at the UC systems that taken our money and destroying our children. Cowards. Anyway, this dedicated to Charlie Kirk. And it's for him that we do this because somebody has to tell you. So, I want to have like one of the things we're going to do is have sort of a question here. Who do you trust? Who do you trust? Hey, if you're going to listen to somebody, pick a name: Ben Shapiro, Tim Dillon, Dave Smith. Doesn't matter. Greg Gutfeld. It doesn't matter who they are. So if you're really old, Hugh Hewitt, Dennis Prager, the great Larry Elder, you're going to listen to them. Victor Davis Hanson. Some of them, you kind of, how do you know you can trust them? If you're thinking about Victor Davis Hanson or maybe Ben Shapiro, I don't know. Certainly David Berlinski, Peter Robinson, Thomas Sowell for sure. But some of these other ones that are very popular right now, everybody's got a podcast. And they'll mock the idea that everybody has one and 15 minutes of fame and all that stuff, but they don't think that way for themselves. You pass a billboard that says something like arguably the most intelligent person on TV, and it shows a big picture of Rachel Madcow, or maybe it was Mark Cuban, I don't know. But really? You just say that's what it is? She's comes in one day a week and gets $20 million, had a little pay cut from $25 million to $20 million. Or The View. Or do you ever ask yourself why you think that, I like this person, I like that person? Do you ever ask yourself why you think they know what they're talking about? They sure act like they do. They sure act like it. David Berlinski wrote a book about it. He was a polymath. He's a polymath genius, if you know anything about him. But what's that guy, Eric Weinstein or something? Brett Weinstein? I don't know. He's just talking like he knows everything about everything. Konstantin Kisin, Ben Shapiro, Dave Rubin. They just tell you, here's the thing. But how do you know? How can you trust that they know what they're talking about? So let's talk. I'm going to tell you that I can tell you, I can ask you a rhetorical question like that, and I can give you the answer. This is not bragging, but I can't deny it. When Charlie Kirk went up against somebody, he was right, and you could trust him because he cared about his country, he cared about his faith, he cared about you. Can't say that about these other people. So, when you think about loneliness, I read this book about John Adams when he was on the verge, staring over the edge of a cliff that he had to jump off of. He just had to, like William Wilberforce. He said that my conscience is held captive by the word of God. He had to do what he had to do. Could have had a nice life. Could have kicked back and enjoyed wealth and privilege and everything else, but he threw it all. Like all the founding fathers, he threw the dice, cast his fate to the wind. But he, and I'm sure there were dark moments. Like, what am I doing? And John Adams wrote in his one night. He's sitting in Philadelphia. His wife's in Boston, Braintree, Quincy, changed its name a few times. You should go there, take a look, take a pilgrimage and see what these guys, what they did for us. Appreciate it. So he's writing in his diary, is anybody there? Does anybody care? Does anybody see what I see? Somebody defined loneliness in that book that I was reading it about. I think it was a book on a social topics, but they define loneliness as it's not the absence of people. It's the feeling that nobody out there understands what you're going through. And this is a good definition. I think psychologists would, to the extent that they're worth their salt, they would tell you that that's a pretty good one. And it's not the absence of people. It's the feeling that people just don't understand. They don't see what you see. He kind of said, does anybody see what I see? Well, the founding fathers, maybe half of them did, that were at the convention on independency. that drafted the Declaration of Independence. Maybe half of them saw it. But that's a really lonely feeling in 13 colonies to stick your neck out like that and risk death. But look what he saw. He kept his eyes on the prize. He saw it. So if loneliness is not the absence of people being around, I bet you New York City is one of the loneliest places on Earth. It's one of the most populous and densely populated. Maybe true of Tokyo too, Moscow and everywhere else. But how did we get here? They say there's a loneliness epidemic right now. We just get out of one pandemic and here's another one. Well, why should there be? In a country that was founded to be a family, to be one people, e pluribus unum, that's part of the kind of what Dennis Prager called the Trinity of America. It's in God we trust, e pluribus unum, and liberty. So if we're supposed to be one, they used to say this was a melting pot. And when I was in high school, they changed it in the history or social studies books, whatever they call it. They changed it to it's a salad bowl. Everybody comes here and maintains their own identity. And that's never more true than now. You got Minnesota changing their flag that was unifier and a history of that state. They changed it to Somalia. They just can't help whoring themselves to throw out everything in the name of what Gad Saad just called suicidal empathy. It's really sympathy. Sympathy means that empathy means you can identify with them. So sympathy is just having pity on them. There's a big difference between pity and concern. The left has pity for everybody except themselves. And they want to be seen as virtue signaling rescuers of everybody. But they don't have any answers. They don't have any answers. There's talk about the lost boys, the lost generation. The lost boys, I think that was children and mostly boys in Africa who were being taken and put into the military or put to death by the Muslims, the beautiful Islamic religion of peace that's just destroying the world as it has since it started. And I guess kind of nobody cares. We do care, we don't care. We do care. We just want to send them money and gay pride brochures on how to run their country, but we don't want to really help them. I read this book once called it was interesting. It's something I've believed. That's the way my mind works. I think about something and I think that's probably really a true thing and the way it ought to be. And then I read a book about it that kind of crystallizes it. But this was a book written by a guy who was I think he was a Navy SEAL or Green Beret. And then he went to Oxford and then he went to Harvard, got a PhD. And he got his PhD in, not philanthropy, but when you do good works for people, when you try to help them. Man, it's crazy the way a word just goes out if you don't write it down. There's this great Arab proverb. Speaking of writing it down, it says the strongest memory is weaker than the palest ink. I used to tell people at work, you got to write stuff down. But it's when you're doing good works for people. For some reason, the word utilitarian is writing over it. But throw me a bone here, somebody who knows what word I'm searching for. But basically, it's just helping people, humanitarianism. And if it comes to me later, I'll throw it in. But anyway. This is what he found out is what we found out in Somalia back in the days of Black Hawk Down is that you can't just send people food. You can't just send people food. You have to have a force, to make sure it gets there. We sent food and the warlords would just take it and black market it and let their people starve. So we had to go in with military, make sure it was getting to the people we were trying to get it to, because the UN wasn't no help. And I think the Marines um, intervened in Liberia and Grenada and places like that. But anyway, so these lost boys, we got lost boys here. Yeah, a lot of them. I saw them, and in my career, I began to be a manager, a foreman, manager, etc. And I'd see these folks coming to me either by hiring or by temporary services, and maybe they were going to college. But there was a real. I think that was the real wave, first, second, third, or fourth wave of feminism was seeing these boys being cast to the wind. And so that's kind of who I'm talking to. I'm talking to men because I can't tell women what to do. I can only hope that they'll realize what they've done and the damage that they've done. And I'm talking about women of both sexes. So, they've created the eunuch states of America, the benighted states of America. Benighted is an incredible word. It means overtaken by moral and intellectual darkness. So why do we have a loneliness epidemic? Suicide is huge. It's huge. I was just reading about a pastor, very famous. He actually interviewed Obama and McCain. He was sort of like a Joe Rogan. He had written a bestseller, and he was Rick Warren. He was up from the coast, Orange County coast or something of California, and he'd written a book. So he got to interview these guys, and that's another story for another topic. But basically, I guess his son killed himself, and so they have a ministry to people whose children have killed themselves. We know somebody. No more than one person, unfortunately. And so, I think that loneliness is part of that. But when you're lonely and you join a gang and you do all these things, because I think again, psychologists who are, what do you say, worth their salt, and they're not many of them. Frankly, I could do a better job than most psychotherapists, and everybody's got a therapist today. They're all running to therapists, and because I'm educated, but because I'm wise, I latch on to wisdom, and those of you that do that could do the same. Things are simpler than they're made out to be. So, there's an epidemic of loneliness in a country that promised in its founding document life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and e pluribus unum, out of many one. So you don't have to be. So I guess I was talking about psychology, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I gave a talk one time about fellowship, having fellows, being fellows in the ship. An older guy came up to me and said, that's all it means. It's not something esoteric, but not feeling like you belong. Not feeling like you belong. Isn't the left always blaming the death of people that are gender dysphoria, gender confused? They snap on a letter to the 13 letters they have there. I saw one the other day on Gutfeld. There's a woman in Canada, GMMGGBBTT. I thought it was a Roman numeral of a date until it went on for 20 more letters, like Dave Chappelle calls them, the alphabet people. So they have, there's two Qs. And I'm going, well, one's probably queer. What's the other one? Questioning. Man, they don't care if you're lonely and lost. They only care if they can think they're helping you, even when they're hurting you. So don't they blame all these suicides? If I don't mutilate this person or give them drugs It's always the go-to. If I don't give them drugs or mutilate them, what was it called? Soma in Brave New World? There's a drug. Ulysses called it the lotus eaters. These people they met on an island that ate some lotus petal that made them just not care or not think, just remain ignorant. Ignorance is bliss. So, they don't really care about the loneliness of those young people that are lost and need an answer. They don't need surgery. So I saw a meme that said, puberty is a blocker. Puberty is a blocker. You give somebody a drugs to mask the whole idea of who they really are. But then they blame, well, if they commit suicide, it's your fault. Well, no. One of the things we'd like to do here is free you from this, first, this discourse regime, second, this ignorance, this veil of planned ignorance that is being forced on you. These people don't have answers. That's why I started off talking about, Bill Maher. He'll just tell you everything, and then he'll meet with Charlie Kirk when he's 60 years old, and Charlie's 32, and he says, hey, you were right. You were right about a lot of this stuff. This is a guy who spent his life trying to tear down and smirk, and at best, damn with faint praise the people on the right. This is not a battle of left and right. It's a battle of right and wrong. There's no. That's why they like to talk about it being left and right, because left and right means that you can move to the middle, and that's where we ought to be. We ought to be in the middle. But right and wrong doesn't have in the middle. How can you be in the middle of right and wrong? You can't. They say, oh, the religious right. I was at this barbecue or something for the founder's birthday of this high-tech company startup I was with. And this engineer, probably educated in the UC system or something, Berkeley or one of those places. But he, or any of these cemeteries for young people. And he's talking about, at least he got a STEM degree, but he's talking about how the local school board in the town near him, not even his town, his community, but, they've got religious right. I think 3 of the 5 people, I've talked about it before, because I went to the big meeting. It was it was like a sculpture, but he's talking to me. He doesn't know me. He doesn't know what I think, but he feels free to say, this right, this religious right. The religious right. They're ruining everything. Yeah, they are ruining. Yeah, they're shining a light on the cockroaches, and the cockroaches don't like it. Just like when the brilliant, God bless him, Elon Musk came in and shined a light with his wonderkinds, all these brilliant young people, and having a chance to serve their country legitimately. Shined a light on take any of them. The Department of Education, which was created by Nixon, and all of a sudden, Trump can't axe it when it deserves nothing more. And who goes crazy? Maxine Waters. The people, not in her district, but in the district that she's overlording. She lives in a nice area. She's overlord for these people that I think they have a literacy rate and a math, excuse me. They have a math capability rate at graduation. Larry Elder talks about that. That's just horrendous. Does she care? It's like Washington, D.C. schools or New York schools when you got people like Obama in charge of, does he care about those schools? So I guess if loneliness is, nobody cares about you, you got to realize that nobody's allowed to. C.S. Lewis talked about the emasculation of men, of boys. I think there's a book called The War on Boys, and some moms, God bless them, they're starting to realize it. They have sons. What are they supposed to do? Take them down to the kindergarten and have them, order that they may be made into women? Look, if if genitals don't confer, don't affirm a gender, then how does removing them? This stuff isn't complicated. It's like that VP and Boy's vice principal in Napoleon Dynamite. This is not that complex. It's really not. It's the abandonment of simplicity that makes people kind of go crazy. It's not having a rudder, not having an anchor, not having a, what else do you need to sail? A compass? They take all that away. That's what C.S. Lewis, he wrote a thing called Men Without Chests, Men or Rabbits. He says we attack honor and we mock honor, and then we're surprised when there's a traitor in our midst. He said we make geldings. That means we castrate the horses, and then we bid them to multiply. The left always attacks the middle class. Always. Even the moderate center is soft and squishy. You know, churches, what used to be called the religious right, they're They're not into apologetics, which is a defense of your belief. You can get a degree in that or a certification, like I did, but they're not into. They're apologizing. They're into apologizing. Like Obama when he went to the Middle East and apologized for us, because we elected a guy who didn't have a strong father, like Bill Clinton and others. And lo and behold, he's over there apologizing. Somebody asked him one time, this should have disqualified him from being elected. They said, "Hey, do you believe America is exceptional?" "Well, I believe that America's exceptional in the same way that the Greeks and the British believe they're exceptional." Well, they don't. So this guy, this is a guy who made it to where he was for reasons that we know, but he spent most of his time, brief time, in the legislature in Illinois by voting present. Could you think of more of a coward than that? Because when you vote present, it counts as a no, but it doesn't count as a no. So you don't go down on record saying no, but you still say it. I mean, why do they even have it? Cowards. So, this combination of church and state, because, Obama said he was a Christian and he went to this Christian church where this pastor said, "God damn America," for 20 years or something. He went there, gave $25,000 over the course of 20 years. And, this combination of church and state, if you don't believe the government has taken over its role, they're telling Catholic organizations what they can do or not do. That was a problem under him. It's a problem again. Anyway, what happens is they take away the purpose, they take away the mission, they take away the meaning of young men's lives. And he can create, he created Obama Youth, but what were they doing? What were they doing? What is George Soros doing to these people, to these young people? They making them think they're paying them to act like they're anarchists, Antifa, and so on. Anyway, they've emasculated everybody. There was a great principal of a homeschool group that he'd say, your kids, we're not raising children, we're raising adults. And these maniacs will say, well, somebody kills somebody, they're 18 years old. Denzel Washington was talking about this. They kill somebody at 18 and they'll go, oh, well, they're a child. His child. We have to try them as a child. What? When I coached basketball, I started to. Well, he pointed. Let me get back to that. He appointed. he pointed out that there's no culture has ever had this idea of an adolescent, this adolescent idea. No culture has ever had that, where you're either a child or an adult. You might be a young man and a young woman, but you're not some other thing that they just invented that they didn't say how long it lasted. I guess it lasts till you're 26 because you can be on your parents' health care with Obama's care. Orwellian nightmare. They keep taking from you to do more to you. And it's to force, to compel someone. This is what Thomas Jefferson said when we started off on the right foot. No pun intended. He said, to compel a man to furnish funds for something that he abhors is an abomination. And so they come in and they the first step is just to emasculate. This is how you honor women, by destroying their children, their sons. This is how you make it an even playing field. Well, anyway, this guy used to say that we're raising adults, we're not raising children, not adolescents. When I coached high school basketball, I would call the other schools and I'd say, I'm the men's coach. The women's coach will be contacting you about their games. And they'd say, well, what are you, a college? Because, no, I said, no, we're a high school, but I call them young men and young women. I mean, they are. Some of them had children. They couldn't be, can you have it? What did they call it in the media? Children having children? I mean, is there some point where you stop calling them a child? And I used to tell them, you're a young man, you're a young woman. You're getting, I mean, at the same time, these Orwellian lunatics on the left are trying to lower the age of consent for everything. They're trying to hide what they're doing to your kids from you, the parent. And these kind of things wake up. Some parents, some people like Bill Maher kind of gets shaken out of his stupor and say, wow, that's crazy. Tell me you want to tampon Timmy Newscomb, you want to take my children away from me and do what you want to do to them? So anyway, this headmaster, he used to say, your kids aren't passengers on a cruise ship. They're sailors or Marines on a battleship. Everybody's got to be so careful and in being careful, you have to ruin a whole generation. People say that COVID did that. They were out of school for 2 years. I don't know about that. I don't know how those 2 years are gonna, but they were lonely because even if their mom and dad stayed home because the county said they had to, like it did for my company. Unbelievable. They gave me a laminated letter that I could show a cop if he pulled me over. Say I'm a necessary worker, or whatever the term they had for that. I'm necessary worker, and everybody wanted to be one. I have no idea. The rest of everybody wanted to stay home. So whatever. They just have no idea what they're doing. So, but you got to be careful. You got to watch yourself. So you have men in a country that was founded by men who pledged their lives, their fortunes, who died over and over again, either to defeat the British, so we could have a country, to defeat the Democrats, so we could get the end of slavery. Didn't quite work out. But we're supposed to be careful. I was swimming, and we live with an HOA. I'm swimming by the pool, and there's this guy over there, and he's listening to some sort of Catholic rosary service or something, devotions, and so we just started talking. I asked him if he believed in God and stuff, and so we kind of talked about that, And then we started talking about Trump, and he kind of said, he looked over, looked left, looked right like a bird. And he said, we got to be careful because these people around here, we live too near the left coast, and you got to be careful. You can't say you're in favor of Trump too loud. Like, what? I mean, I know that's true, but what does it mean? What does that mean? We're supposed to be, our leaders are supposed to be, Bill Maher, Kimmy Kimmel, Mr. Rogers, Jen Psaki. He's got a podcast now. One of those Harridans or whatever that's called, those harpies from PMSDNC or whatever. She has a show. She has a podcast, and it's called The Best People. And, again, remember the reverse barometer. She has the worst people on. They're tyrants. Your women and your children will become your tyrants. McCain. Here's a guy that runs for president, and the only reason he had any kind of a shot was because he had Sarah Palin. So the conservatives could say, well, she's a governor, not a senator like him. And she's not a weather vane. I called him weather vane McCain. And Trump said he wasn't really a hero. Well, I talked to guys from the Naval Academy that are about that age, and they said they didn't have a high opinion of him. And, he was, when he came home from Vietnam, this wicked generation was calling them baby killers. And then they went on a couple of years later to launch the biggest baby killing effort ever that dwarfed Herod, the slaughter of the innocents. He basically sided with Jane Fonda, who should have been tried or deported. He should have been imprisoned for treason. Treason, no doubt. Her and her husband. So, everybody's got to be. You got to be soft. What did this is why we're lonely. This is why we have loneliness, because we don't have a compass. We don't have a moral compass. Not even SCOTUS has one. There's supposed to be one. Congress, the president, you kind of start to feel like you're on your own because they have abandoned this country. And even the churches, I go, I'm not trying to knock them. I'm not trying to knock the churches, go there and support if it's worthy to be supported. I remember Billy Graham used to go around, and I think probably Charlie Kirk did this too. He didn't talk so much about religion. That was his purpose. I mean, he definitely was the star he sailed by, but he talked about the war that we're in right now. The culture war is a holy war. You young men are soldiers, and you're being castrated by the left that likes to do that. Literally. Now it's literally. It used to be figuratively. As C.S. Lewis said, making you into geldings and then telling you to multiply. I saw this thing on what was Bill Maher. I just happened to pull up this clip, and he's got this panel, and it's got Douglas Murray, who's really brilliant, and some guy who is not. One of these guys who sells out to the left, like what are you doing? I think he was in the military. He's got big biceps and a bald head, and he's ranting about the manosphere and all these stupid bros who are not against Trump, and he's talking about Iran. He's talking about the only problem with the draft is that Pete Hegseth doesn't have enough women in it, and on and on and on. And then there's this doctor his name is Ezekiel Emanuel or something, so he's obviously Jewish. And then Bill Maher. And Bill Maher is taking questions for the panel. He's reading off of cards. One of them's on AI. He kind of gets that right. It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. It better be watched out for, or else. And they do a pretty good job with that. Then they start talking about how Kanye West can't go to the UK. And do you think that's right or wrong? Well, Douglas Murray's from the UK, and he said, I think it's wrong. I think politicians like to virtue signal so they don't have to do their real job, which is taxes, schools, defense. They're really the only things, not schools, local government, but stop ruining them. That's all. Anyway. And then so the next question is about, and the Jewish guy says, yeah, this anti-Semitism, it's gotten out of hand. It sure has. Sure has. Totally out of hand. And they're blaming young men, the manosphere. They're all, well, yeah, because of Nick Fuentes and God, I don't even want to remember their names. But Tucker Carlson, these guys who were celebrating Hitler and damning Churchill. Who would have ever thought? Who would have ever thought? But that's not. I mean, if you go over to Iran and you fight for the IRGC instead of the people that are being murdered by them every day, by the occupiers, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Council or whatever it's called, they're not Iranian, they're not Persian, they're Islamic, and they've been tormenting the whole Middle East for 50 years. But thanks Jimmy Carter, Soviet Union, France. And so if you just, if you fight for the wrong side, it's like Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, if you get on the wrong train, you can't run down the aisle in the opposite direction. It's not going to do any good. So, those aren't men that are fighting for Iran. Soleimani, that Trump blew up. Trump's the man, not Soleimani. Soleimani was the father of roadside bombs. It was maiming our people. So you can't just believe this anti-Semitic garbage and stuff and just say, oh, well, that's what I heard the other day from the guy I like to listen to. People are not, they're not leading. They're not heroes. They're not men. So, step one. So what do you do about this loneliness? Is, I had a lot of trouble in school, and my dad wrote me a note, especially junior high. I had a lot of problems with it. And my dad wrote me a note one day. It said, you're not crazy. Everyone else is. So that's the first step. You have to realize you don't buy the lie. You don't buy the lie that people like Bill Maher know what they're talking about. Because when they started talking about having children, and he goes, well, I don't have any. Yeah, in other words, the falling birth rate. It's a problem in Japan. It's a problem in Europe. It's a problem, except for the Muslims they brought in, which will take them over if you do the math. So Bill Maher, nobody had an answer. The Jewish doctor said, well, I don't know. I don't know. So is he a Jew? Does Judaism inform him the way it does Dennis Prager or Ben Shapiro or even Dave Rubin, I guess? I don't know. Or, certainly not Jonathan Leibowitz, right? So you got the men and the not men. You got the people. So nobody on there had an answer. And it was the bald bonehead said he blames Trump and J.D. Vance. And they all kind of said, how can you blame J.D. Vance for people not getting married and having kids? Then they started talking about, well, housing is too high. Well, you know what? Yeah, this is going to hurt a little bit, but I used to counsel young men, don't settle. When they trained us on how to hire people, one of the things they said is don't settle. When in doubt, cast them out. So women, my sister said to me a long time ago, There's no men anymore. There's no men anymore. There's no John Waynes or whoever she said. Steve McQueen, John Wayne, whatever. Man's man in those days, whatever. And I said, well, I spend a lot of time in locker rooms and things and females, right? Stop calling me. It's a charity calling. I give a lot to charity. I keep calling. Anyway, I said, there are a lot of women, a lot of women, they don't know if they are. Well, now they don't even know if they are a woman. So don't blame men that there's not enough women. That, yeah, a lot of them gave themselves away for free. And then they, expect that some man's going to treat them like they're virtuous. I mean, it's not a lot of women like you see in those movies where you saw men. So, and I'd tell young men, I'd say, look, don't be too eager to rush into this stuff, because after the courts took away your kids and your house, half your house, when it wasn't even your fault or your choice. This bastardized, adulterized mess of the legal system where they treat the woman like she's some sort of flower. We'll get into more than that, but then just dissects the man. Well, anyway, I used to tell him, if you just want a roommate that won't get cranky every month, then get a roommate. But don't get into some sort of a deal where you just don't have any, if you need them more than they need you, it's not going to go well. It's just not. So anyway, know who you are. Know whose you are. Know your enemy. Know your enemy. Because in the end, know your enema. Because in the end, you'll get it. Don't let them have what's not theirs. Understand that this is a war. Fight. Fight, fight, fight. Understand the trade-offs. That Bill Maher types can't be trusted. That TDS democracy and Sam Harris and the climate crisis and the so-called soft bigotry. Don't be a child. Grow up. Sorry, it's a lot less painful than the alternative. And vote against people. Vote against people for a while. Don't vote. Don't just vote, Don't say I'm not going to vote. I'm going to vote for independent, throwing it away. I'm going to vote libertarian, throwing it away. I'm going to stay home. That'll prove a point. No, unfortunately, for a while, we're going to have to vote against. We're going to have to vote against the party that's the enemy of our country. We have a two-party system, especially since the Democrat Party moved all the other parties in: communist, socialist, anarchist, terrorist, Islamist. So, you're going to have to vote against them for a while. We only have two parties. One of them is numb and stupid sometimes, like the John Thunes and the McCains and the Romneys. And the other one is deadly, dangerous. They are destroying the country that your forefathers tried to give you. I fell asleep at the switch. So that's all you have to do. Those things, and don't get committed to something. Stay in school, but don't let them win. Don't break the law and get caught up in their system. That's what they want. And get your head together and understand that you're valuable. You're precious, whether you're secular or religious. And take a careful look at who you're following and where you're following them to. Make sure they know. Make sure they can prove it to you. Don't just buy it. Don't just buy the lie. Look at the end game and see what it's doing for you. Then you won't be lonely. Get on a team. Get together with other men that understand these things, that are existential. And don't be confused. Don't try to sail without a rudder, without a moral compass, without a sail. They can try to take the wind out of your sails, but if you know how to sail, I took classes in sailing. There's ways to get around it. So, if you think that this is not war, it's not a war on you, and in the Orwellian fashion, they call it a war on women or children, when that's exactly what they're doing. The women of the world will benefit by you being what they can't be, and you'll benefit by them being what they can be. You can't do what they can do. They can't do what you can do. So don't let them drive the bus, especially if they hate men, if they hate themselves, if they're running to a therapist all the time. And I'm talking about men and women, women of both genders. If they're confused, well, they probably won't make a very good guide, will they? They're not your boss. They're not your overlord. They're not your captain of your team or your unit, squad, battalion. You're in a war. And you have to wake up, calm down, reconnoiter, figure out where you're at. And I can help. I can't tell you what to do exactly, step by step in the career world. I'd say get a degree in STEM or get a trade so you don't have to fall into their system. But unless you defeat the enemy, you'll always be facing DEI and school problems and prison problems and crime problems and all the problems, the social pathologies that stem from fatherlessness. So it doesn't matter whether they emasculate the father or outright kill him. You're going to have the same result. So you've got to fight back, and don't fight against each other. Don't join some guy with a beanie or a bald head or whatever on podcasting and telling you nihilism, like it really doesn't matter. You can't fight City Hall. You can't. Or my God, hating Trump after what we saw for 4 years with the left. This country will be lost or saved by you. Same thing with your church, your school, your community, your world. So it might be a lot of pressure. It might feel like a lot of pressure. It's no more pressure than the alternative, which is just to be a lotus eater, take your pills, take your chemical castration, and just slide down, slouch towards Gomorrah into the grave. So, have hope. You're valuable. You're irreplaceable. So, what the good book says, it applies to whether you're a believer or not. It says, act like men. Act like men. Be strong and courageous. Thank God for people like Charlie Kirk who came along and showed you a way. And you can judge a lot more about a man by his enemies than by his friends. So choose you this day. When Moses was having a lot of trouble with his followers, some of which were Jews and some were not, he told them one day, God said, tell them, draw a line and say, choose you this day who you will serve. The culture war is a holy war. You got to pick a side. There's only two sides. If you're a believer, you're either a saint or an ain't. If you're a non-believer, you're either a patriot or a traitor. It's not any more complicated than that. Don't let people tell you that it's complex. That's the first step in spinning their web that they got a degree in or whatever. No, these professors need to be fired or at least deprogrammed. It's just to stop believing all these one-word answers. Misogyny, blah, 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 blah. Intersectionality, BLM, CRT, OBS. That's the only one you got to remember. Or OCS, because most of it doesn't come from bulls, it comes from cows now. It's been that way for a long time. So, if you want to be free, or you want to be a slave, that's about it. I'm not trying to be down, but someone has to warn you. Somebody's got to blow the bugle and say this, if you're being attacked, fight. Anyway, thank you for listening. This is Jeremiah Gunn Show. Ran over a little bit. I apologize. But don't forget, this is dedicated to Charlie Kirk. This is Jeremiah Gunn Show. Speed it up. If you want to listen faster, speed it up. I'm going as fast as I can, and I'll get better, but just hit the speed button and play a little faster, whatever clip you want. Thank you for listening. Thank you. We got a country to save. We got a world to save. If we can save this one. And it's not over yet. It's not over. Don't listen to polls. Go out and fight like all these great patriots we see now are doing. Thank you. Thanks for listening.